We're talking with Mike Waldron, first string, first call, first chair acoustic guitar player for all of our recording sessions. Mike, you are originally from Michigan, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And how did you make your way to Nashville?
I had been playing in bands up there. I guess you could say I was became a big fish in a small pond at one point. And some things were going on where it was like, I'm going to have to grow up and get a real job or else learn to play guitar. And so I decided to move out to LA and go to GIT. I gave myself a year. I said, I'm going to take 1 year. And so I just played guitar 15 hours a day and had no social life. Did that for a year, then played out there, did some gigs and did a little tour. And then I started playing with a girl named Jan Buckingham, who you probably know Jan. She'd written some country hits. And me and a guy, Odie Blackman, who became a pretty successful songwriter, were slumming around out there doing gigs together. And she talked us both into moving to Nashville. So we came here. And things happened pretty quick. About a month after I got here, my first gig was on the Opry. So.
Wow. And how did you get that? Did you audition, like go to the Musicians Union and look on their board there for stuff, or how did you kind of start plugging in?
It came from Jan. I'd been doing all these gigs in LA for her for free, but just for the experience of doing them. And like, many things in my life, the free things and just favors you did for people sort of, paid back in the end. And when I moved to Nashville, she was sort of plugged in. So she knew, she had heard that the McCarter sisters were looking for a guitar player. And so she got me an audition with them, and I went and auditioned, and they called me and said, yeah, you got the gig, and this week we're leaving to go on the road, and before we do, we're on the Opry.
Wow. So when did you first realize that you may have the talent to play guitar as more than a hobby, but actually to make a living playing it? When did you realize that you may have had that super talent to be able to do that?
Early 20s, when I was still in Michigan. I didn't grow up with a lot of music around our family, and nobody in my family really played an instrument. And I played piano young, and then was in the high school band and got a guitar, just picked stuff up by ear. And it was never really an option to be a musician, or kind of in my family or where I was from. So, it was like, what are you going to do with your life? So I spent years searching to what I was going to do with my life. And in the meantime, I'm playing guitar and playing in bands, and the bands are doing pretty well. And I worked hard at it. And I just realized that I had a certain knack for it, but also I had a pretty good work ethic. And so early 20s, I was playing with a pretty good band in Kalamazoo, a blues band named Seventh Son. And that was when I was like, maybe I can do this if I just really busted my butt.
And how did you find the Guitar Institute, and why did you select going there instead of maybe going to a university that had a guitar program?
Well, I was actually in college in Kalamazoo at Western Michigan University for a couple of years, and they didn't have a guitar program. They had a good jazz program, and they decided to add a guitar, one slot to the guitar program. And of course, I didn't know anything about jazz really, but I auditioned and didn't get it. but after, early, by the time I was about 22, 23, starting over and getting a 4-year degree at Berkeley or somewhere else wasn't really a good option. And the GIT was a year program.
Right.
And they were, we didn't have computers and video and all kinds of stuff. So it was in guitar magazines. You'd read these interviews with these guys that went to GIT. So I made a little audition videotape and got in, which was exciting, but it really probably wasn't as hard as you think it was.
I don't know, man. I would think that they probably were fairly choosy, because I wouldn't think they would be able to have that many students.
Yeah, you would think that, but when I went out there, I was pretty experienced. I didn't have a lot of theory knowledge and things like that, but I had a gig knowledge. I'd played a ton of gigs. I knew a lot of songs, and I ended up working in LA more than most of the teachers out there, doing, $50, $100 gigs, but just that experience was good. And I was surprised when I went out there that, even though I couldn't play a lot of fancy stuff like some of these guys, that I had good practical knowledge to get me by. I don't know if that answers your question. But.
Well, it does, but I know for me growing up, I was in bands, and
Yeah.
I did all that stuff. And when I went to college, I played I played bass actually with a jazz pianist who was really, really good.
Right.
And I asked the guy, I said, "Oh, I really want to go to Nashville and be a studio player." And he said, "Oh, you'll do fine. You'll be great." Well,
I know it. Well,
because I just I didn't have the proficiency on any instrument to be able to come down here and sit down with a group of musicians and play.
well, no one does when they move here, really. I mean, they think they do. Everybody's got experience, and you may be good, but to get in a session environment, as you well know, is a whole other level of pressure. And you got to be the guy. It's got to be close to perfect right out of the box, So you weren't alone, and it's. I did my first sessions when I got to town, and I look back on them, and I'm like, they were great experience, but I wasn't very good.
Well, I know for me, coming to town really as a songwriter, that when I did my first demo session, even though the guys that we used were not A team and
Right.
great players, as soon as I heard them learn a song and play it in 20 minutes,
Yeah.
I said, I'm done with wanting to be a studio player, because there's, if these guys can do this, and there's hundreds of other people in town who can do this,
Right.
I don't have a prayer. So,
Well, it's still an amazing thing after all these years. I still walk out of sessions. What did we just do?
oh man,
3 hours. We just cut 5 songs that sound like records.
I know, man, and I still walk out in awe of what you guys do every time we have a session, because it's just it's amazing to me. That we'll do a retro R&B thing.
I know.
And you'll pull out your I always call it a national, but what the fretted dobro guitar, you'll pull that out and do some really, really neat stuff. And the next song will be a bluegrass song where you're doing the fast picking and taking a couple of leads in it and all that. And then the next thing will be a contemporary country thing where you're painting the wall, and it's just, to me, it's just flipping simply amazing that you can shift gears like that. Not only that you can shift gears, but that you can play it. I mean, you can just play it.
Yeah, I think you have to. Well, first of all, it's required that you can be able to wear many hats, and you have to respect all these different types of music to play them correctly. you can't just look at something as, you can't look at, oh, it's just a polka. That's going to be, ridiculous. And, it's like, man, that stuff is, when played right, is great. Or, um, and the fun thing about the 515 group, and, other groups as well, but especially I've worked with those guys so many times, is somebody's doing the heavy lifting on the song and carrying us through it, whether it's me or Tim or Dane or Greg or Rod or whatever, it's somebody different all the time. And it's like, okay, I'm going to just see where Dane goes with this. And I'm going to work with him and let him be the guy.
Well, that's true. But in the end, it all has to mesh together.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't be 5 or 6 guys playing a part.
Oh, yeah.
And just playing playing the chords and, giving the singer something to sing to. It's got to all mesh together.
Yeah.
And there's such an art to that. I mean, that's the difference to me, between being a guitar player and between being a musician.
Yeah.
And, for me, I never got over that hill where I feel comfortable sitting down with a group full of people because they're all better musicians than I am.
Well, you had other talents too. You were
They're better players,
producer, songwriter, and it's if you want to be a session musician, you got to focus on that. I've written a lot of songs over the years and produced records, but my main focus has been session guitar player.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your road gigs.
Okay.
You mostly played, most of the time you were with Leanne Womack.
Yeah, that was my longest gig, 12 years.
And which is a long time to be with anybody.
Yeah, and we left on great terms. It was just time to go and try some different things. So yeah, I would still be there if I wanted to be on the road. She was great to me.
Now you were playing electric with her though, is that right?
Almost all those gigs I was playing electric on.
Yeah.
In fact, there's whole sides of Nashville that don't know I play acoustic, and vice versa. People that don't know I play electric, which is, you kind of get pigeonholed into one thing, but most of my road, live playing has been electric.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a funny thing about this town, but I get it.
Well, and for those people watching and listening to this interview, Mike has played electric on some of our sessions too, and I won't hesitate in a minute to hire him to do that. He's just so solid. He's solid in both chairs, but that acoustic chair for a lot of what we do is really kind of that and the bass and drums are really that core that has to work. And when you throw somebody in there that's not locked into that, it definitely screws it up. It makes it a different kind of a deal.
You can attest to this. When you talk to people that don't really know a lot about how to make records and acoustic playing, they think of acoustic as being the simple, 3 chords. And when I had my original studio, it was hard to find great acoustic players. And I was like, electric players, they were all over the place. So that's when I started focusing on that, going, well, maybe I'll just do it myself. Plus, I was getting tired of lugging big amps around and hurting my back.
Yeah.
But it's playing acoustic is such an art. It's got to be clean. You got to be silent while you're doing it. It's to me, it's harder than electric in a lot of ways. But they're both. You got to have talent to do either one, obviously.
Well, the acoustic playing is what I call it. It's so clinical.
Yeah.
When you're finger picking, you can't just finger pick it and throw it in there. If it's not right on that click and right in that pocket, it's screwed up.
And every note has to speak out. Well, that's with every instrument, but yeah, I spent a lot of time just working on one note at a time, sometimes just on tone and what it takes for that note to sit in a track just right. I spend a crazy amount of time on that kind of stuff, is more than I do on playing fast.
Right.
It's just in the pocket and in tune and clean and tasty and everything else you got to do.
Well, you've got the glassiest right hand of any acoustic guitar player I've ever heard.
There's some great ones in this town.
It's that yours is it's just so right on it, man. It's so right on it. Now you played with Martina for a while too.
I did.
Is our electric player, Greg Forsman, our first chair electric player, is now out with her and has been out with her for 6 or 7 years now.
I think he's been there probably close to 20.
Wow.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, maybe more than that.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a great gig. That was my first really big artist that was having hits at the time, and we were touring with Garth Brooks, and we were going to Europe, and I was single and wild, and it was a lot of fun.
I think Martina's a pretty good person, I think, to be around most of the time. But now you also worked with Linda Davis, Miss Creedy,
yeah,
and Tanya Tucker.
Yeah.
And have you got any Tanya stories you can tell us, aside from the potted plant story, which for those of you who are watching this and listening to it, if you want to know that story, you're going to have to come to Nashville and record with us and just kind of take Mike aside and ask him about it.
Yeah, I can't. I hesitate to tell any Tanya stories out here. I've got some, but come to Nashville and record with us. And
yeah. Well, we all do. We all have stories on artists that we've worked with.
Yeah.
You were also on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno and on Late Night with Conan O'Brien. Was that with Leanne?
I did all of them, or several of them. I did The Tonight Show, I think 6 times with Martina, maybe twice, 2 or 3 times, and Mindy once, and Leanne 2 or 3 times. Yeah, I love doing those shows, but once again, it's pressure, man. When if you sit there when they're counting down, because you don't get to do it over, and if you start thinking 40 million people are going to be watching this, don't screw up. If you start thinking that, you'll start shaking. You'll get a little nervous.
Yeah, so you don't. There are no do-overs. I mean, you just you do it, and
I think if the artist or Jay or something maybe screwed up, they might do it over, but they're not going to do it over for me, the guitar player.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's pressure.
Yeah.
Totally pressure. Now, you also, in your studio work, worked with John Bon Jovi on the movie Stand Up Guys that starred Al Pacino and Christopher Walken. And what was that experience like?
It was really awesome. My style of playing has nothing to do with John Bon Jovi, as you probably well know. So when I got that call, I was like a little shocked. But he had in mind he was wanting to do more of a songwriter, Bruce Springsteen kind of thing. And so there were some really vibey musicians on the Marco Giovino on drums and Dennis Crouch on bass, and it was a great experience. We did over at Blackbird. I think we did 2 songs in one day, and it was a hard 8 or 10 hour day.
Yeah.
And he came in, John Bon Jovi came in there, and he knew all our names and worked harder than anyone. I mean, we worked our butts off, and he was working as hard as anyone in there all day long, getting it just how they wanted it. And so I was impressed with that, impressed with him in a lot of ways. Nice guy. I loved it. I'd go work for him anytime. And then he was nominated for a Golden Globe for that one of those songs.
Yeah. So the nice guy.
Yeah.
He just got in there and rolled his sleeves up and got down and dirty in the trenches and helped you guys.
We worked our butts off. There was very little overdubbing. It was mostly, let's play this thing, suss it out, play it 50 times if we have to, and get it just right. And then we'll go talk about it and listen to it and come back and try it again. And yeah, a lot of sweat. I slept good that night after that one.
I'll bet. Well, you know, I mean, there's something about that pressure.
Yeah.
You know, like the live TV things and even in the studio when that red light comes on and when the drummer's counting it off, it's what you said a while ago is so right. If you start thinking, man, I want to screw this up. If you start thinking that instead of just thinking about what you're doing, you're going to screw it up.
Well, you know, we've all done it. And, you know, once you've done 10,000 demos or records or whatever, you have a little bit of credibility. So if you screw up, people give you some slack. But you know, you've seen me fall on my butt many, many times.
Oh, well, man. Now you also worked with Hillary Scott and the Scott family on their Grammy-winning album, Love Remains.
Mm-hmm.
And that was produced by Ricky Skaggs. What was that experience like?
It was great. I've worked for Linda Davis, Hillary's mother, since '99, so over 20 years. We toured for a couple of years, and then she got off the road to raise a family, and I went to work for Leanne. But she's always called me for 21 years now. In fact, I just did a chart on something for her last night. But we did at one point, she did a Christmas show for 3 years at the Opryland Hotel.
Yeah.
And it was a great band, great music. And Hillary was like a teenager, and she was in the show. So I was around Hillary watching her just start, you know, get her start. And then I guess maybe, I don't know how long, 4 or 5 years ago, Linda called. She said, we're going to do a little Hillary's dad's is Lang Scott, was also an artist. Wow. And his dad had passed away, and they were like, we're going to do a little record just for the family, just in honor of my dad, a little Christian religious album. And can you come over and help us arrange some songs? I was like, yeah. So I went over there, and it was Linda and Lang and I and Hillary, and we'd usually bring a piano player in, and we'd arrange these hymns and all this stuff. And it was a lot of work and getting these things just right. And anyways, they were going to do this little album, and I kind of forgot about it. And several months later, they called and said, listen, Hillary took this to her label. They want to get behind it. Ricky Skaggs is going to produce it. We're going to go in and make this record, and we want you to play electric on it. I was like, I'm in. And yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. You hear stories about people, you know, Ricky's a master musician, and, you know, he was known as Picky Ricky all these years because his records were just perfect. And, so that's a little intimidating going in, but he was really laid back, really open to different kinds of music. Bruce Hornsby came and played on a song, and, you know, it was really a neat experience. But I will tell you that the worst point of the whole thing was I'd played banjo on one of the work tapes, one of the demos. And so I was playing electric guitar on the session, and I didn't think they were going to call me to play banjo when there's great banjo players all over this town. And Ricky Skaggs and Brian Sutton's on acoustic guitar, great banjo players. And I hadn't touched my banjo in like a month. And during the session, they said, did you bring your banjo today? And I said, no. They said, well, go get it. So I went home and got it and brought it back. And they're like, you're going to play banjo on this song. And I was like, I was tight on that one. I was like, these guys have heard some great banjo players, but luckily what I did was what the song needed. So it worked out. But I was a little nervous.
So that was because they liked what you did on the demo, the home demo thing that
Yeah.
you've done.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if they felt like that nobody else was going to be able to recreate that, then
Yeah. Which sometimes that's the case. Yeah, great. Sometimes a great musician is not going to play it the same way as whoever did a demo. We all have seen that happen.
that's true. That's true. Well, you also, besides playing acoustic guitar and all, the accoutrements that go along with that, the 12 string and, the National and all that stuff, you also play ukulele, banjo, the banjo. What else, man? I mean, it's like any acoustic instrument that we need on a session. You always have it with you, and you pull it out and you play it.
Yeah.
You've played mandolin. You've bailed us out on mandolin a bunch of times.
Mando, bouzouki. What else have I got up there? High strung, gut string, baritone, acoustic. Yeah, I just bring them along because if I don't bring it, somebody's going to ask for it.
Of course. Of course.
I always have a dozen, I have a dozen guitars in my car every time I show up somewhere.
What do you mean there's a ukulele on it? Did you bring it? Of course I brought it. I always have it.
Yeah.
For all of you, again, you should see the back of Mike's SUV when he opens it up. I mean, there are 15 instruments in there, plus his gig bag that's got all of his stuff in it. It's amazing what he brings to a session. I mean, he's ready. He's loaded, ready for bear.
Some days I don't feel like loading it all up, but if I get lucky and had a session the night before, I can just leave it in the car, parked in the garage.
Well, as long as it's in the garage. Yeah. Yeah. Well, now you are also you are married to Marcia Ramirez, and for those of you watching this, you know that Marcia is one of our singers, and you and Marcia have been married how long now? Quite a while.
22. I think it'll be 22 years this year. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, we met on the road with Mindy McCready. When our keyboard player left, and she had a record deal at the time with one of the guys in Mindy's band called the Janglers. They were on RCA, and the record deal was maybe fizzling out, or something wasn't, or they were in limbo or whatever. So Jim Kimball said, "Well, I know a keyboard player. She's in my group." He says, "We'll get her out here. You'll love her." And of course, they warned her to stay away from me. She didn't listen, obviously. A true story. But yeah, we hit it off right away. And it's been awesome. You know how she is. She's great for me.
She's great. She's great
and talented.
Oh man, I always love it when Marcia comes in. I mean, she's bubbly. She goes in, she does her thing. She's out of here, and it's great. The client loves it. It's a wonderful thing.
She's a badass. You've seen her play with the Steely Dan band and stuff like that. She's singing parts that most singers can't do. And I always joke that I'm third or fourth chair in my family.
Well, yeah, I mean, gosh, with Derek Wells, he's been what, the guitar player of the year?
Yeah, he's been I think the ACM guitar player of the year a couple times, and he's played on, I don't know, 50, 60 number one records, producing artists now, produces Maddie and Tay and Scotty McCreery, and I better not.
Okay.
I can't remember all the names. So.
Well, and for a while when Derek was just getting started, Derek played a couple of sessions with us. And then it got to where when I would call, he had a woman who booked him.
Yeah.
Who would who was just kind of the person, the go-between.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, he's booked. Well, do you want, if he could do it, would you want cartage? And
Yeah.
he immediately, I mean, within a couple of months.
Yeah, it didn't take him long. He worked hard on it and had a knack for it, the personality,
And I'm sure you spent hours and hours and hours with him growing up. I'm sure he would come to you and say, hey, how do I do this? Or how do I approach this? Or what is this? And
some, he did most of it on his own. I mean, he had the advantage where he could, if he had a session, he could call me or his dad, who's a great guitar player. He could call either one of us and get a matchless amp and a tom amp. He had a access to great stuff. And I think most of it he just picked up. He never wanted to be in the music business. I think he just sort of picked up the lingo, and we all had home studios while he was growing up. So he knew how it worked and saw great musicians come in, and a lot of our friends and his dad's friends, they all knew him and were encouraging to him. But Derek put in the work, he sat in his dad's basement for a year, just woodshedding. Yeah. Which Marcia was worried about. And I was like, just let him be. This is what he's got to do.
Well, I guess that's where he really turned the corner and decided, okay, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So, all right, man. Well, I want to ask you one more thing. I don't know if there'll be time for this or not, but I want to ask you about your cabin in Gatlinburg, you and Marcia's cabin, which has been, you've had some challenges with that since, since the fire. What was that, 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Thanksgiving of 16.
Okay.
So it'll be 3.5 years ago.
Yeah.
We had this nice cabin up there on the hill. We rented out, and we'd go up there occasionally. And Derek was up there on his honeymoon, and that fire came ripping off through the mountains, and Derek and his wife were literally driving through flames to get out of there. And he called Marcia, who was hysterical, and said, I don't think your cabin's going to make it. But we had no way of knowing. So I got in the car about 5 a.m. and drove up there. I'm like, I got to see what's going on. And it was blocked off. You couldn't even get in. I found a way around and went up there, and it was gone. Everything in 3 floors of a cabin down to a pile about that tall.
So it was already gone by the time you.
It was still smoking. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, it's been an ordeal, but it's back up. You've got a new one, and I know you guys go up there every opportunity that you can. And I really can't
head up tomorrow. It's a good place to isolate.
Yeah. For all of you watching this too, we're in the middle of the COVID-19 isolation thing. So that would be a great place to go. I mean, you're far away from people, and you can sit on your porch out there and, take your walks, do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, we're lucky in that case. It's not making money right now, but no one's making money right now.
Nobody's making money right now. All right, man. Well, I think that'll do it. Of course, I'll think of a million things to ask you once we get off of here. But hopefully this has been informative to you people who are watching it. It has been to me, and I always love talking with Mike because, and like I say, if you want to hear some of his stories, you're going to have to come here and record with us. So, but we'll see you hopefully in the next 3 weeks. We'll have a session together and be up and running again. So.
All right, Chip. Good, always good talking to you, and learned a lot from you over the years. So, take care of yourself.
All right. Thanks, man. Bye.